Hi everyone and welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be talking about the 2022 Audi e-tron, and specifically this is my first drive in the e-tron, so I wanted to give you all just my initial thoughts and impressions on how the vehicle drives, how loud is it, how comfortable is it, and overall just, what's my initial feeling from being inside the e-tron. And I should say that I am in the premium base trim for the e-tron. The only option selected on this particular vehicle is the convenience package, which adds a 3D camera, black roof rails, and a couple other things. One of the first things I realized when I got inside the e-tron was everything feels premium for the most part. So the dash material, the steering wheel, the center console, soft touch materials are everywhere. Everything feels like a $71,000 MSRP car should feel, for the most part. There are a couple things that I will mention in another video on the dislikes I have for the e-tron, but that's for another video. And as I'm driving here, going down a road roughly 55 miles an hour, it's relatively quiet. You don't hear a ton of wind noise. You don't hear a ton of the cars whooshing past you. I would say overall, it's pretty solid. It's not the most quiet car I've ever been in. I've been in a Q7. I think that's probably a little quieter than this. But I would say, not having an engine to help drown out some of that wind noise and road noise, this is definitely one of the more quiet EVs I've been in. So one of the other first things I noticed as I'm driving is just the comfort of the ride. So the e-tron comes standard with an adaptive suspension. And so you can take it from comfort mode, efficiency mode, all the way to off-road with the electronic stability control turned off. And you notice when you go over bumps that this car has a little bit more comfort and quality to it than, say, a standard electric vehicle. Once I started driving, something I really noticed was the weight of the vehicle. So the Audi e-tron, as it's configured, weighs roughly 5,700 pounds, which is pretty large. Give you context for that, my VW ID4, which is also a very heavy vehicle, weighs 4,700 pounds. So this car weighs roughly 1,000 pounds more than the ID4. Now, obviously the ID4 is a compact SUV. This is going to have more space on the interior. But for an SUV this size, especially if you're comparing to a gas counterpart, the low center of gravity definitely makes the handling and cornering of this car much better than something like a Q7, for example, because the Q7 is not going to have like a baseline of batteries going across the entire bottom of the car. It's going to have a gigantic engine all up front. And they do certain things to help distribute the weight on those vehicles. It's not going to feel the same. So even though this is a very large car and it has a ton of weight to it, the acceleration along with the distribution of weight both help make it feel a lot more nimble and just a little bit more fun to drive than you would typically expect. Now, when it comes to acceleration, the e-tron is no slouch. Audi estimates this e-tron gets 0 to 60 in 5.5 seconds. That's not the absolute quickest SUV in the world. I'll tell you now, as I put it into sport mode, yeah, you get to feel acceleration more than enough than you're probably going to need. Passing on the highway, coming off a shoulder, getting back on the highway, anything you need to do to accelerate, you're going to have the ample power to get there and get it. I mean, wow, it's just so fun. Basically, every electric vehicle I've been in that can accelerate at all just puts a little smile on your face when you put your foot down. And it never really gets old. This car is very solid, very sturdy. You don't feel like you're gonna turn around a corner and just gonna flip over on its side. It feels like if you wanna take it into the canyons and give it a little juice when you go through some of the corners, that it can handle it. I probably wouldn't do that to the extreme, but certainly if you wanna have a little fun with it, because of the center of gravity, you can definitely do that. Everything inside here from the controls are familiar. So if you're coming from an Audi SUV or an Audi product already, the infotainment system is more or less the exact same. They have the virtual cockpit, which I love, is the exact same. The way I look at this car is that Audi didn't necessarily go out of its way to make you feel like you're buying into an electric product. They wanted to make you feel comfortable that they could swap out a traditional ICE engine or ICE powertrain and give you an electric powertrain. I currently have the e-tron in dynamic mode, and yeah, the steering is relatively tight. There's still a little play with it. It's not extremely direct, but it feels like if you turn your wheel to the left, the car goes to the left immediately. It's not a ton of play. If you don't want to drive like that, you can certainly change the driving experience to a more comfortable setting where it's more effortless to turn. You have a little more play with the wheel. So Audi gives you the best of both worlds. In terms of regenerative braking, so the e-tron does have that, but it's not one of those things where it's always on or it's always off type situations. Where the ID.4, you can twist it from drive to B mode, and B mode just has regenerative braking. On the e-tron, you have two pedals behind the steering wheel, but these pedals behind the steering wheel can increase or decrease the amount of regenerative braking that you're getting with the e-tron. So if you're someone who does not like regenerative braking, then you can turn regenerative braking all the way off. If you just want a little bit of regenerative braking, you can turn it on. There's a few different levels. So it's sort of the best of all the worlds for people who may or may not like that stuff. And of course, it has a slew of standard safety features: radar cruise control, blind spot monitoring, automatic emergency braking. So there are all sorts of things that this car comes standard with. And in my review, I'll talk a little bit about that further. You don't have to pay for a ton of extras to get a really great car. You are spending $71,000 on this car already, and you should definitely be getting quite a few features for that kind of money. I'm looking around in here. Everything feels very well put together. You don't feel like any rattles or loose trim pieces, nothing like that, of course. It's a luxury car. You should not expect anything like that. So the steering wheel doesn't have touch sensitive buttons, which I actually think is a good thing. I like having buttons I can physically feel with my hands when I'm driving, so I can kind of memorize the feeling and location of different things. Visibility is really good. The A-pillar is nice and small, so there's not a lot of blind spots on the left or right front. Now looking out of the back, visibility is really good, even though it's really sloped looking from the outside. The only blind spots you're going to have are the two pillars in the back. And in an SUV this size, there's always going to be some blind spots there. So what are my overall initial thoughts of the e-tron? I would say that it's relatively quiet, feels very sturdy, feels premium for sure. Visibility is good. The Audi e-tron has been the same since 2019. I don't know. I would say that it's probably due for a refresh going into 2022 for the 2023 model year. But as it is, I think if you could get this car on a decent deal or buy it, gently used from 2019 or 2020, and you're looking to get into an SUV that's electric of this size, this is going to be hard to beat. There's not a ton of competition out there, and there's not a ton to complain about. It feels like a really great car. So with that, make sure you subscribe, because I'm going to be doing my review on the e-tron, doing a little bit deeper dive into the features and some of the things I find out. And then I'll follow that video up with a couple of videos for what I like and what I dislike about the car. And that feels like it's going to be a hard video to make. So we'll see how it plays out, but certainly stick around, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.